Welcome to the Pitcher Nail Down. I'm Jason Gilbo at JGilbo11. With me is Nick Tasso at The Inefficient 2, looking at Thursday's pitchers, and we're both kind of just scratching our heads here looking to see who is even viable in cash games right now, and it's not sitting pretty. We're looking at a pretty big-size slate. We're going to start breaking down the 3:30 and on games, as it looks like both sites have kind of split things up a little bit, and with no real main slate to kind of focus on, we'll tackle it all for you. So jumping right into things, we are looking at the White Sox and Athletics. Matt Latos versus Kendall Graveman, 8.5 total. A little concerning there if you're looking at pitchers as far as Vegas numbers go. Oakland is favored -113. You and I pretty much skipping over this game as far as pitchers go. Maybe look at some hitters there. Your thoughts on either one of those guys?
The only thing that I can like out of this game is that it's in Oakland Coliseum or O.co. Everything else just doesn't add up well for him. I mean, you got Matt Latos, who you never know what you'll get. I believe last year he gave, 5 or 6 or 7 runs in the first inning or so for the Marlins, and then he had an awful season, so it's not a lot to like there. And then on the flip side, you got Graveman, who he was okay last year, but that Chicago offense, I think it's pretty good this year. I mean, it's a couple games, but it looks pretty transformed from last year.
Yeah, and the thing about the A's is they don't strike out a ton against right-handed pitching, just 18.6% last year. They're kind of they're not a good offense, but they're kind of pesky. They don't strike out a ton. They do, work the count. So if Oakland struck out a little bit more, you could take a shot at Latos and GPPs. But outside of that, I mean, both sides, it's a pretty good pass for me.
Yeah, I mean, I was looking into Oakland's numbers last year, and I thought they were pretty good at OBP, but they were kind of near middle of the range. So the more we talk about it, I might think about Latos, but I still want to stay away from that, especially if we're talking cash games here.
Yeah. Looking at the Houston game and New York, Mike Fiers versus Nathan Eovaldi. Two hard throwers, two guys who can pick up Ks every now and then. Look at the Vegas line, over-under of 8. New York is favored, -120. Eovaldi is kind of intriguing just because his struggles have come mainly against left-handed pitching. And you look at Houston, they do have a couple guys like Colby Rasmus who can, go yard. Castro has some power. I usually stay away from guys in Yankee Stadium, but GPP-wise, if the weather can clear this one up, I don't think Nathan Eovaldi is a bad play just because Houston's strikeout rate is so high against right-handers. But as we saw tonight, Houston's already roughing up Pineda pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a huge fan of Eovaldi in this. His ground ball rate is pretty good. It's over 50%, so that's something you like. But he usually just doesn't strike out many batters. But like you said, it's against Houston, so you get a chance here to rack up some Ks. But at Yankee Stadium, I don't feel too confident about him.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a high risk, high reward. And it was kind of in the similar boat that Pineda was in tonight, where you were looking at him in tournaments only, and definitely didn't pan out here early as we're, watching games in the 3rd or 4th inning. But on the other side, Fiers is a guy who's almost similar play for me. Just I don't like targeting guys against, a heavy lefty lineup in Yankee Stadium.
Well, I kind of like Fiers a little bit more than Eovaldi. I never can pronounce his name correctly. That always throws me off. But Fiers last year, after coming to the American League, he had a 2.25 ERA in August. Went up a lot in September. It was mainly because he was gassed. But, I mean, you kind of have to sort of like him in this matchup. The Yankees as a whole are kind of an old team, and they could all have pretty bad nights. Obviously not tonight is one of those. And I like him, too, because a lot of people are going to be scared off against the Houston Astros pitching after what happened to McHugh in the first inning tonight. So I think you're probably going to get Fiers at a low ownership. And his strikeout rate last year was pretty good. It wasn't the best, but it was 23.6%. And he had a decent that was for the month of August, sorry. And he had a decent home run per 9 that month as well. So I think there's a lot to like in this matchup, but it's a risk. Like almost everything, every pitcher on this slate is.
Yeah, I mean, to go with the lefties, what you're looking at heavily on New York, he's allowed a 295 career WOBA to lefties, so definitely not bad. I think the more you look into that game, I think there is something there. And like you mentioned, I mean, it's pretty much there's things to like about bits and pieces around the slate today, but nothing to really feel confident in. Look at the next game, Marlins and Nationals. It's in Washington, the home opener there for the Nationals. They're big favorites in comparison to other teams on the slate at -145. Still an 8 total there. Tanner Roark on the hill. He's a guy who's made some spot starts in the past. You've maybe taken a flyer on him as a cheap guy previously in DFS. Not a big strikeout guy. He is going to get a matchup against the Marlins, who have looked decent and the first 2 games here is putting up some runs and scratching stuff together. But overall, I think they are going to be a pretty subpar team against right-handed pitching for the most part going forward. Just due to the lack of options on this slate, I think Roark is a guy to keep an eye on. No one I'm going to be totally loading up on and putting all my eggs in one basket.
Yeah, I agree with you on that point. Like you said, Miami isn't that good. They have Giancarlo, and that's kind of about it. A couple guys like Yelich too. But you're going to get the savings with Tanner Roark in this matchup. He's only $7K on DraftKings, so I think you kind of go with him and feel a little bit confident with him. But again, it's just not one of those things that you can feel 100% confident with.
Yeah, definitely. And, look at the Marlins last year against right-handed pitching, 297 WOBA, 19% strikeout rate. Their ISO was fairly low, even with Stanton. You figure he did miss a good portion of that season. But I mean, really, you work around him. You keep Gordon off base. I mean, obviously, those are things that easier said than done, but he does that. He should have a pretty successful start.
Yeah, and they were no hit through the first 5 innings too against Verlander in their opener. So, I mean, there's potential here for Roark kind of to shut him down a little bit.
Yeah, and if I'm chasing wins, I think Washington's where I'm going to be headed with this one, with Conley on the other side, which not on my radar tonight.
No, he's never on my radar either.
Look at the next game, and unfortunately, I wish there were 2 different arms in this game because it is one of the better parks in baseball, AT&T Park. Alex Wood, Jake Peavy, 7.5 over/under there, just because you're looking out west in one of the better parks. San Francisco slight favorites. Peavy, a guy who's been more down than up over the last few years or so, definitely showing signs of aging. Alex Wood, who's a guy who maybe in a different matchup I would be looking at. I still think San Francisco is not a team I usually like to target with lefties.
Yeah, and for Peavy, the only thing that I had to look at was his home runs per 9 against lefties, which was 1.26, which was almost double than what he had last year against righties. I know he didn't pitch some of the year because he was injured, but there's a bunch of lefties in that Dodgers lineup, and I think 3 of the first 6 or 4 of the first 6, right, are all lefties, and I don't want to have anything to do with that. I know it's a good park, AT&T, but I'm just staying away from that matchup. And on the same kind of thing, Alex Wood really isn't a guy that I'm really ever going to go for. He doesn't get a lot of strikeouts, and he gives up a lot of hits. So, I mean, maybe on FanDuel where you don't get penalized as much, but definitely not on DraftKings.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing this game has going for it is the AT&T Park factor. It is a day game, but although it is, colder weather out there right now, I think this is one where I'm probably just going to be more taking shots with guys of at the plate than anything with guys on the mound there. Because, yeah, you mentioned the lefties in that Dodger lineup, and also Justin Turner, Yasiel Puig. Those 2 guys have been, can definitely take PV yard too as well. So.
And Turner last year was hitting righties a lot better than he hit lefties. He was a reverse splits kind of guy. So, I mean, he could probably hit PV around a little bit too.
Yeah. Looking at the next game, taking a look, and we're starting to jump in. Oh, sorry. We're going with the Red Sox and Indians, 6:10. There was some snow in this forecast, and you got to treat that a little bit differently than rain just because it's a little more of a safety issue than anything. But you do have guys who do have some potential. You're looking at Danny Salazar, Joe Kelly. Obviously, Kelly's not one of the better names on the slate, but Salazar is. But obviously going up against a Boston offense that's shown to put up some runs already against what's projected to be a top 5 rotation in baseball and in the Indians.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you have to look at Carrasco in this matchup just because there's no one really else that you want to. That's a kind of a big name that you think's going to do well. I know he's had his struggles in April. He has a career 6 ERA over there, and he actually struggled at home last year with over 5 ERAs. So there's not a lot of things going for him, but I mean, it is the Red Sox who have a decent offense, but it's kind of a hard thing to pass up when you don't have too many options on this slate.
Yeah, I mean, as far as K percentage goes, if you want to solely base and look for strikeouts, um, Boston, it's not a favorable matchup for strikeouts, but they can. Um, Time to time with some of their hitters, especially with some of the younger, newer guys in that lineup right now. Um, Especially on that back end, you're looking at Jackie Bradley Jr., Swihart, who younger guys, and you're looking at Salazar, 26% strikeout rate last year. The walks can be a little bit of an issue at times, as well as giving up the homers, 1.112 HR per nine last year. So I think overall, I think Salazar's an intriguing option. But still, I mean, you kind of look at this slate and you're just like, maybe I'll toss in a couple tournaments, and none of these guys were going to be leading the way for in cash.
Yeah, the more I think about it, I kind of don't mind Joe Kelly. I'm not being biased because he's not very good, but you look at the Cleveland offense, and outside of Lindor and Kipnis and even Santana, you don't really get scared off by too many people. Mike Napoli still can't hit righties, so I mean they've roughed up Clay Buchholz, but Buchholz really shouldn't even be the second starter for them. But that's besides the point. So I mean, I think Kelly, especially at his discount, what is he only 6,300 or so? I think you could kind of get away with him and then just throw a lot of bats into your lineup because with all these terrible pitchers, that's what you're gonna need. You can't really afford too many 0 for 4 people when you're playing, even in cash games or GPPs. You kind of need everyone to contribute.
Yeah, definitely. And you look at that Indians lineup, you mentioned there are a few more right-handers than there were previous years, but it is still, you look at their lefties, they are the more predominant hitters in that matchup. Lindor, Santana, Kipnis as well. Kelly was hit hard by pretty much right-handed pitching. 365 WOBA allowed last year, but just a 305 WOBA to lefties with a 309 OBP. So if you can keep those lefties at bay like he did last year and manage to get around some of these subpar righties they have, you can definitely work away a pretty decent shot at a quality start.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, at 6,300, you're not really expecting too much. You're just hoping not to get negatives. Hopefully, a win, 10 fantasy points, 15 maybe. But the whole thing to me is kind of saving the salary in this matchup because, like we've looked at, all the pitching is pretty bad, and a couple people could get quickly negative points. And if you have one guy who doesn't get you a lot but gets you 10 or 15, it's going to set you apart from a lot of lineups out there.
Yeah, I mean, you're pretty much just trying to avoid the fire at this point in the slate.
Absolutely. You just want to not jump on that grenade.
Looking at some of the 7:05 games, and really it's a 3-game night slate or 4-game, depending on where you're playing at. Twins, Orioles, Phil Hughes, Ubaldo Jimenez. Baltimore is favored, minus 130, 8.5 total. Another Vegas one that usually would keep us away. Ubaldo Jimenez is kind of an appealing matchup just because, I mean, this guy, when he gets the sinker going, he's kind of unhittable. If he can keep his command in control, I do think he's worth a look tonight. And much like the other guys, it's a GPP type of guy who can kind of be a boomer bust pitcher at times. But overall, I mean, 21% strikeout rate last year. Walks were a problem, 3.3 based on balls per 9. Outside of that, I mean, I think it's a Twins team that's better against lefties and righties, but they still are a top 15 offense and top 10, depending on where you look.
Yeah, I mean, it's just one of those slates where you got to find the guy who's not going to hurt you too bad. That's the only thing I'm worried about with Ubaldo is he's one of those guys who can easily get you the negative points. On the flip side, most of the Minnesota hitters are righties, so he could do pretty well against them and even rack up a lot of Ks. But it's in Baltimore, which could produce a lot of runs. So it's kind of a little nervous situation for me.
Yeah, and I'm definitely with you there. Um, the Twins did have a 21% strikeout rate against right-handed pitching last year, so there's something to take note of. But I mean, other than that, I think obviously Phil Hughes is not really on my radar tonight going up against this Baltimore offense. How about you?
No, not at all. I mean, I try to stay away from guys like Phil Hughes all the time.
Yeah.
So
Moving on to the 9:40 game, looking at the Cubs and Diamondbacks. And if you were picking solely based off Vegas stats as far as getting a win, I think Lackey's your best bet to get a W tonight. But tough matchup in Chase Field, a 9 over under. Lackey's been a guy who can, I might want to take the veteran presence here of a guy who he doesn't blow up a ton. I think, as long as he can avoid that front order of Peralta, Segura, and Goldschmidt there, that back lineup's not that bad.
no, absolutely, I agree with you on that. The more that we talk about it, I think Lackey is kind of okay. In my notes, I have staying away from Lackey, but you make a good point with he's one of the guys who could probably not hurt you the most. And like we said on this slate, you kind of need someone who won't kill your lineup. I mean, Lackey did have, I believe, his lowest ERA of his career last year. But that was basically, he got lucky a lot. He had a left on base percentage of over 82. So that was, I think, over 10 points higher than his norm. And I'm not sure that's going to continue. But like you said, if he can get past Goldschmidt, can get past Peralta, there's really not much to like down in the bottom four guys.
Yeah. And you look at Lackey, I mean, we're talking about not trying to get killed out there on the hill. His only real struggles last year, I mean, he had obviously that epic bombing at Coors where he gave up 8 runs. And you're looking outside of that, I mean, he's never really given up over 4, just 2 other times last season. So, he is pitching in Chase Field tonight, which is not a great place for pitchers as we've seen already this year and in the past. But I do think Lackey, just the more we go into it, he might be the guy who kind of can lead the way for me tonight, especially with that Chicago offense and all those lefties who are going to be facing Ruby De La Rosa.
No, absolutely. I agree with you on that. He is getting older in age, 37, but it's the first start of the season, so I don't think that's going to affect him too much. Probably later on in the season, he might get a little fatigued, but I think you're talking me into playing him.
Don't pin me against the wall if he just goes in, but I do think the more we go on, he's looking like my guy here.
Alrighty.
And on the other side of that game with De La Rosa's struggle against left-handed pitching, there's no way in hell I can play this guy against this Chicago Cubs lineup.
This is like the day of all former Red Sox starters, basically. You got PV, De La Rosa, Lackey. Too bad Lester already went, and they're on the same team, but...
Yeah, that's true. It's the guys they just used and tossed out for a year or two outside of Lester.
Yep.
But yeah, De La Rosa, big struggle there.
Yeah, I'm staying away from him at all costs.
I'm looking to play a lot of Chicago Cubs in my lineup anyway, as far as hitters go. So that'll be my core. So definitely no use of La Rosa there. Moving to that Rangers-Angels game, 10:05. We've seen the Angels offense be, God, I mean, they are bad. That lineup they are trying out there night in and night out is awful.
1 run in 2 games. Just to keep this in perspective, I believe the Rockies have 10 home runs in 3 games, and what that Story kid has 3. I've lost track. So
he's up to 4. He's got 4.
So
insane.
I don't know what's going on with the Angels offense. I don't like recommending Derek Holland, but in a slate day like this, you might have to. I mean, he doesn't get too many Ks. He can rack up Ks every once in a while, but for the most part, he kind of had a K rate of under about 15 or so in each game, and I just think this is one of the matchups where you're not going to have a blow-up of epic proportions. He might blow up and kind of give up a couple of runs, maybe 4 or 5, but I don't think he's going to give up so many where he's going to just kill your entire team.
Yeah, and I mean, you'll go back to his early years. You look at 2013. He
was good.
Yeah, he was definitely a respectable left-hander there, and I think you look at the Angels' offense. You just have to worry about Trout and Pujols. That's it. Cole Calhoun not good against lefties. Outside of that, I mean, you're looking at guys like Escobar. Daniel Nava's been playing.
Yeah,
I mean, this lineup is you pitch around Trout, and that's it. I mean, you can work your way through that lineup pretty easily.
absolutely. I mean, it's mainly a righty lineup, and you had John Lester who allowed, was it one? Did he allow the run, or did he shut them out yesterday? I think he allowed one, but
Yeah,
still, I mean, there's not much to like out of this lineup, and Pujols is aging, and I almost forgot he was on the team, to be honest with you.
yeah. I mean,
I was,
really,
I was thinking about this, and I was like, who do they have besides Trout? And I was driving home, and I was like, oh, they still have Pujols, but he's done absolutely nothing.
yeah, and you're still paying him, $20+ million. So that must be nice.
Absolutely.
As far as Hector Santiago goes, he was a guy who was up and down last year. I'm not a big fan of him against this Rangers team because, even though they are heavily left-handed, they do still have some guys on that, right side that can hit lefties pretty well. You're looking at Beltrade, Shields. So I think I'm staying away. I'm kind of surprised the Angels are actually favored in this game.
Yeah, me too. I mean, even against the lefty today, Wade Miley, Prince Fielder hit a home run, so that's definitely plausible as well.
Yeah, and Santiago, he is a guy who his ground ball rate is very poor, although it is Angel Stadium.
It's under 30%, and it's just really bad, especially since he doesn't get any strikeouts virtually. So,
yeah.
Well, like you said, Angel Stadium, it's kind of similar, I guess, to Kauffman Stadium. So he's kind of like Chris Young for me. He can give you so many fly balls, but they just don't go out of the park.
Yeah, you're kind of hoping he gets a little bit lucky in that situation, and the balls that maybe do go out, you're hoping nobody's on base.
I'm not risking that with Santiago.
No. So, I mean, to narrow it down, I mean, Holland, Lackey, Rourke, I mean, really, those are your three that you feel safest about, and then you could take some shots at some of the high strikeout guys that we talked about earlier.
Yeah, I also like Fires too, a decent amount, and I think you're going to get them at a really low ownership just because of what's been going on in Yankee Stadium lately with a lot of runs.
Yeah, definitely. I'm in agreement there, and definitely be sure to keep tabs on the weather. It's looking like a pretty ugly day across the East Coast as far as snow and rain goes, so it could be a wet one, and that would just make this ugly slate even uglier.
Oh, absolutely.
That's going to wrap things up here with the pitcher nail down. Check out dailyfantasycafe.com for all our great tools and content.